Thank you for joining us on the Rose Care Workshop. We're at the Bronx, Melrose, Jardin de la Roca. Co-facilitating is Michelle Correa.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm working Melrose New Generation Community Garden out here in Melrose, kind of close to Jardin de la Roca. And I'm just here to help out. So today we're going to be talking about maintaining roses. So the first thing we want to talk about is always clean and disinfect tools. Not only because of COVID-19, but if you're using these tools, there are certain plants that may have diseases on them. So you always want to clean these like Lillian's doing. She's just got a regular napkin and she's using some alcohol to just clean the shears and pruners that we have. What you use to clean them is either alcohol or you can use some bleach with water to dilute it. Once you have everything clean, um, you want to make sure that you remove the mulch around your rose area. The reason you remove the mulch is because you don't want it to have too much moisture around there. So you want to remove as much mulch as you can and just leave soil in the bottom. The mulch the mulch can add the mulch can give your plants the black spot fungus. This is what it looks like on the plants. They're just black spots on top of your leaves. That's if your plants get too much moisture or retain too much moisture. That can happen. Well, that's a way they can happen. The best way to remove this, to me personally, because I don't like to use any chemicals, you want to remove the leaves. Remove the leaves manually because they can damage your roses, as you see right there, that you see black spots on the roses. It could be a lot of damage for your roses. They start off at the bottom and work their way up, so it's best to, always pay attention to it. You see the black spot on the stem. Another way to take these out is you get a gallon of water and a few tablespoons of baking powder and a few drops of non-bleach dishwashing liquid. You don't want any chemicals in that dishwashing liquid. This is still an organic way to clean them out. You put them mostly on top of the leaves, and then you do this weekly until it clears out. And you want to do this after rain. So if you know it's going to rain that day, it's best to do it after rain because the dishwashing liquid keeps the baking powder on it, and that's what you need to clean it off. And that's with the fungus. Now, once you do that, it's best to know if you have like once bloomer type of roses or species roses, which are a little stronger. They just keep blooming over time. Those are better to work with pruning because you have more play with them that you can prune a little bit more. So the thing that we're looking at is the 3Ds: damaged, dead, or diseased stems. So damaged and unhealthy stems look gray, kind of black or dark, like these right here. That's a dead stem. Some are even peeling if they're bad. Um, and those are the ones we want to take out. The healthy stems usually look green. Let's show a little green. Green, red a little bit, maybe orange. Show a stem with them. They look a little orangey. You see the stems. Okay. Those are the healthy ones. Those you don't have to worry about. What we're also checking while we prune is cross stemming. Cross stemming looks like this. it's when your stems cross each other, and those are not good because the thorns can damage each other and ultimately damage your roses. So you want to cut those off, and you want to cut from the inside. You want the inside to have as much open area and space as possible. So you always cut from the inside. And something we like to do is cut at a 45-degree angle. It kind of gives the rose a sideways slant so that water falls off of it instead of landing right on top and staying there, giving it water damage. Now, what we also want to look at is when buds grow. Can you show the bud? When these buds grow, you want to make sure you cut the ones going inward. So all of the plants that are growing inward towards the middle of the bush, you kind of want to cut those out because you need as much open space as possible in the middle of the bush. The ones growing outward, you can cut about a 1/4 inch on top, just to give the bud a little, let's show a 1/4 inch, a 1/4 inch on top, just to give the bud a little room to grow and to have nutrients still in it without actually damaging the bulb. And you want, another thing we can talk about is deadheading. Deadheading is cutting all of the dead or damaged roses. So such as these, those are deadheading. You could just cut those off. All the roses that are actually dead, you could cut those off, try to cut them off early to give as much nutrients to your roses, because if you don't cut them off, all that nutrients is just going into the dead flowers, and it's taking up nutrients from the rest of your roses. Sorry, a plane passing by. Okay. So after deadheading, that's the last step of spring pruning. Once it starts getting closer to the end of summer, when you see that your roses are dying out, instead of deadheading like I just said, because deadheading is something we did in the beginning to kind of keep the nutrients in, you want to just pull the petals off. Pull the petals off, and that helps the plants go dormant in the winter when you pull the petals off. We just want to keep it like that. And you could also save the petals for your own potpourri or something you might want to do on your own. And again, after use, clean them up. Clean up your tools.
Okay, before you cut these. Okay, as you pruning, right? When you cut these with your pruners, all the ones that are diseased, repeat the cleaning for the other roses don't get contaminated.
Yeah, so if you're pruning and you see that one stem may have the disease but not the whole plant, you want to clean your tools after every cut, just so that the disease won't spread, Now there are different types of pruning tools. We can use this one is specifically for roses. It has the edges here. I don't know if you can see. Specifically for cutting roses. But if you have others, you can also use, depending on the length and how thick the branches, you can use these. Or, can we show the lobbers? These over here.
These are for
These are for thicker ones, such as these. Those are used for,
this is for
show
like,
it off.
these are for these.
That's for thicker branches, and let's show
Hedges, right? Roses, the ones that are like thorn.
the lobber is more for hedges, more for shaping.
It's easier if you want to shape up your rose bush.
Yeah, so that one's just to shape it up to give it the size you want. Any questions or?
Hey, Michelle. Yeah, I have seen a few questions. Should I read them out now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question was, do you mulch to overwinter the roses?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, because you want to keep that moisture and you want to keep everything in there for the winter. The only time you take out the mulch is during the springtime because you're watering, you're planting. You don't need as much mulch on top of it. The mulch is just the protection for the winter.
Okay. The next question is, how much baking powder did you use?
Just a few tablespoons. I'd say about 2 or 3 in a gallon of water.
Okay. Next question. Somebody mentioned they don't understand about trimming buds that are on the outside, a little from the top to promote growth. And if you could also repeat why and how, more information about deadheading.
Talk about deadheading.
Okay, deadheading is just the plant that's already dead. You kind of just want to cut that out because there's no reason to keep a plant that's dying or anything like that. So if it's already dying or you see that it's on its way to dying, you can cut them off just to give the rest of your plant some room for growth. Like these roses,
So these are no good.
even though they're small, I get a little closer.
So crosshead, the reason we cut them down as much as possible, I know everybody wants roses, but if you keep them in the stem and they dying out, the plant itself is still shooting nutrients to these. So the other ones will grow smaller. So you want to make sure you take out all the ones that are damaged and not growing too well to give your other roses a chance to really bloom out and show off versus them shooting into these. Of course.
Yeah, because they'll just stay on the roses and not grow. They'll just be dead plants here.
Then
you always want to cut those out to give your other nutrients to the plants.
These are the two that you're going to choose from. So you're going to, instead of choosing the one that's inside that doesn't get all the sun, you're going to leave the one that's reaching out to the sun. So that's what she means about deadheading the ones that are cross guarding inside.
And how far down the stem did you deadhead? Someone asked.
So
you want to cut down until
the other one reaches it. So this one I deadheaded. So you're going to reach until it's possible to make it into one straight line. If this one is all in one branch, you're going to cut it out into the very end.
Cut it to the point where the branch kind of looks like a pencil, at the thickness of a pencil. So you cut it down to there.
See, this one is dead. So
this is a perfect example. This one's dead. So you want to cut it down to the stem.
All right, thank you, Lily and Michelle. I have about 6 other questions. So would you guys want to come back to this later? Or do you want me to keep telling you, asking you the other questions?
Answer those questions and we'll talk about.
We could answer the questions.
Okay, so the other questions was, why do rose pruning shears need to have serrated blades?
Because sometimes they have thorns, and you want to make sure you cut the whole branch out. So the serrated blade it helps you out cutting it faster without damaging your hands. I mean, I'm not using gloves. I recommend you use rose bush gloves because gloves are very important. You don't want to keep getting thumped. But I'm already used to working with roses, so I don't use my gloves.
Okay. The next question is what to do if roses continue to grow green leaves and do not bear roses in years? And is there a time to cut the wider branches? Does one cut any wide branch?
So if it doesn't produce roses, that means it probably is a one bloomer. So what happened was you cut them before they actually bloom.
For cases like that, where most likely the roses are once bloomers, you wait a little later in the stage to start pruning. You don't prune very early like other rose bushes. You cut later in the season. You try to look for the rose bud.
So when you purchase roses,
So that way when you cut them down, you know exactly where to cut them because the rose bud's already grown.
so for instance, if you buy bushes, you want to actually not touch them at all. Do no kind of pruning unless they dead branches, the triple Ds. That way they actually, you see if they actually one-time bloomers or constant bloomers. Okay, so you want to make sure all these. So these are, for me, I know these are all the time bloomers. But this is the reason this one is getting a lot of disease. Is because we didn't remove the mulch yet. So it's still getting disease. These over here, where Michelle is at.
Sorry.
So where Michelle's at, you see all these dead branches. You want to make sure when you start coming to your garden and prune, you're going to prune all these first. Open it up as much as possible. Don't be afraid to cut some roses because actually roses like getting cut down. They actually produce more if you start cutting them. Let's say they already blossom, and somebody walks from the community walks around and say, "Oh, that's a pretty rose. Can I have a rose for my mother or my girlfriend?" Feel free to just cut it down and give out a rose because roses are produced to always keep blossoming. Species roses are used to that, so they actually like getting cut. So when they get cut, it starts saying, okay, we need to shoot out another rose for them.
Yeah, this is when you could play around with the pruning and do as much as possible.
So this is cross guarding, as you can see here.
So these are dead ones. These are crossing. See, those have to be pruned. And earlier when I mentioned the rosebuds growing inward or outward, this is a perfect example. This started growing outward. So those you could leave alone. And when they grow like that, you can give them about half an inch just to keep the nutrients in, and only this part would get, dried out.
So let's talk about when you first buy roses.
And when you first buy roses, like these new young ones here, you wait a few seasons, about 3 seasons, wait till they get about 4 feet, like the other roses around them. So you could just see their growth, see how much they grow. You're basically checking the growth of these before you start pruning. So you give them a few years before.
Michelle and Lily, I have a few questions about pruning. Should I ask it now? There's a few more questions that we also had about climbing roses. Should I ask about pruning first?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the questions about pruning. I've grouped them all together. What time of year do you prune? Can you talk about how to prune the plant in the fall or winter? Is it possible to prune too much? And I thought you could only prune when it's hot or cold to not promote disease. Is that true? Several questions on pruning.
Okay, so it all depends on your type of rose. So if you have one-time bloomers, you actually prune only one time of the season, and it's best you prune them in the fall because you see all your pruners come out. If you have seasonal pruners, you could prune them as much as possible, but only 1/3 of it. Don't cut as too much out of it neither, because you don't want to stress it out. So let's say you cut some, and then the next 3 months you cut another portion of it. So you time yourself. That way you won't give your rose bush too much of a shock when you're planting them in. Did that answer the question? So you're not you pruning, but not too much, but you pruning in stages. So you want to make sure you prune in stages. You don't prune them all at once, because if you prune the whole bush at one time, you're gonna give it shock. So you are gonna damage the rose bush. And I don't think it depends on you. You don't have to wait till it's too hot, but make sure a day after you nice and soaked, they nice and soaked. The next day you could come out and prune them. At least they have some kind of water in the soil for the nutrients to keep coming up.
All right, and Lillian, Michelle, you guys also have some questions about, people are asking questions about disease and also about climbing roses. What do you want me to ask these questions next about disease or climbing roses?
Do the disease, yeah, you could go ahead. Go ahead. I will try to best to answer them.
Okay, so one person said, my rose bush got a disease last year. Leaves had brown spots and it spread to other bushes. I cut almost all branches and I left only 3. What should I do to help it grow healthy? Should I cut almost to the grown to? Should I cut almost to the for the branches that I have left? And then another person said, every once in a while, there's a small hole that goes through the stems of my rose stems. I cut them off. Is there anything I could do to prevent these holes?
Okay, so with the diseases, that's the actual black spots that I was talking about. With that, the best way to maintain it and control it, um, take out the leaves, take out all the leaves. So every time you see one of those leaves growing, just pull it out. We need those out of the way.
Do not prune.
Do not leave these around your roses. Don't throw them in the compost. These are disease plants. You don't want them around any of your other plants. So once you've pulled them all out, don't leave any around the roses either. Just maintain cleanliness around it. And the water trick that I told you before with the baking soda and a few drops of non-bleach dishwashing liquid, that also helps. Weekly. That's the best.
Don't, yeah, like Michelle said, don't prune them. You just want to pull out the leaves for now, because you want the stem to be sturdy enough, and it will start throwing shoots through the sides, new shoots. So if you prune all these, you still have a chance to see new ones coming out. So those might become healthy if you create the water system with the soap and baking soda. The reason you're using soap and baking soda is for the baking soda to stay on leaves.
Exactly. And that helps with it.
And so someone asked, sorry, about the solution, just before you guys move on to the next point. They said baking soda or baking powder should be mixed in the gallon of water.
Yeah, it should be mixed in the gallon of baking powder. Should be mixed in the gallon of water with a few drops of soap.
Now you want help with trellising your roses?
Now you said something about the holes in the roses?
Yeah, somebody has small holes, they said, in the roses.
Okay, those are
Insects eating.
those are insects. That's a bug. That's usually a burrow bugs. They like to go inside freshly cut freshly pruned roses or stems. They look for that actually so that they could rest their eggs in there. So those are just bugs doing that.
Put a companion flower next to it.
My solution is to put a companion flower next to it, something that would attract them more than the roses. But a lot of people, not a lot of people, some people use this. I personally don't like it, but some people use it. They use a wood Elmer's glue for the tip so that the bugs won't go inside. I don't like to use that, but some people do like to use it. It's a Elmer's glue or white Elmer's glue. is a wood Elmer's glue or white Elmer's glue to put around the tip, just so that they won't go inside. The reason I don't like to do that is because that also could give it a chance to hold in moisture, and moisture is also bad because that's what can create diseases. So with that, you just have to check on it a lot, cut down as much as you can. But those are bugs doing that. That's where those holes come from.
And can you both clarify whether it's baking soda or baking powder?
It's baking powder.
Okay. And then someone asked, what kind of companion plants should people plant?
Typical perennials, marigolds.
Annual.
Oh, annuals, sorry.
Marigolds.
Marigolds. Oh, what's the name you were talking about?
You could plant annual, any type of annual that would attract those kind of places is marigolds, and sometimes what else? Sunflower attracts it, but then the sunflower is you're gonna put it not too close to those, but a nice distance. Sunflower would also attract them because they have those big leaves.
All right. And so should I ask you both about the climbing roses question?
Sure.
Okay. So folks want to know, how do I maximize blooms on climbing roses? And how do we trim and cut them? And when is the best time to do that?
If you want to train them a proper way, you're gonna keep cutting the new growth. For the old growth could actually start shaping it to a trellis type kind of system. So and then you could always use that tape that's for the tomato plants. There's this type of tape that you put around the tomato plants, and you shape them into size. And it's if they blooming a lot, if you don't want to see all that blooming, is that the correct? That's what you asked for. They don't want to see a lot of blooming on the trellis. Could you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was how to trim and cut them, and when is the best time to do that, and how to maximize blooms on climbing roses.
So you don't want too much blooms in your climbing roses. So you're gonna cut it. Let's say you have like 5 blooms in one branch. You're gonna take out and cut at least 2 of them for each branch, because they do have a lot of flowers going all over. So you're gonna just cut onto the very tip of. So for instance, that one has 3. Let's say this is a climbing rose, right? And you don't want all 3 of them at one. So you're gonna leave the most sturdy one there, and you're gonna eliminate the other 2. So you will prune this one down. Because then they're doing competition. You want some nice big bloomers. That's what I'm thinking you want. Because if you have a lot of little ones, you have smaller flowers. And you could trim them down every three months, every 3rd month. So you want to, I don't have climbing roses. Oh, I do. And the climbing roses, they're like a bush. So you want to make sure you tame them as much as you can. If you want, I could walk over to the ones I have. Give me a minute. Just move over to the right. So we're walking over to, not right there.
Somebody just clarified their question, not how to minimize blooms in climbing roses, but rather how to maximize or get the most blooms.
So you want to, since it's a trellis type, you want to make sure they expand wide. So you want to make sure you don't have too much in between. So you want to open them up a little bit. As you open them up and you train them in a trellis, you see they more flexible than the regular bushes. So they don't grow a thick branch. So you could play around them And make sure they get a lot of sunlight, because these, they like a lot of sunlight, the ones that grow in trellises. So you're just going to spread them out, let them get a lot of sunlight, but still, yet and then, you also want to make sure you're cutting the smaller one out. So if you see a small bud, you could eliminate that one, for the other ones could have a nice bloom. And these don't like getting cut too much like the other roses. So you have to do a little bit of research, because I didn't do too much research on these, and see when is the best time to cut the blooms. These, you want to leave the flowers as much as possible. And like Michelle said, dehead them. So you're going to take out just the flower and just let the bulb stay.
Okay, so we also have another question about just solutions. The first one was, can compost or potassium, is there a liquid, help to make a rose bush that hasn't bloomed in years?
Add coffee grinds, eggshells, and compost.
Coffee grinds, eggshells, and compost.
Okay.
That's the best and most organic way.
And then someone asked, can you please repeat what kind of soap and how much to add to the solution? And I think that one was related to disease. And then they want to know, what is the difference between one-time roses and seasonal ones?
The dishwashing liquid is, you can use any dishwashing liquid as long as it has no bleach, because we don't want chemicals in it. And just a few drops. You don't need too much. Just a few little drops. It's just there to keep the baking powder on the leaves, because the baking powder is what's helping with the black spots. And one-time bloomers are roses that only really bloom once out of the year. They don't have multiple roses coming out at different times of the season. So one-time bloomers are they're a little harder, because those you have to prune a little later, just so you can see the bloom coming out of it. And species roses are just ones that can grow in any type of weather. They usually last longer. They're more durable, and they like getting pruned. They have multiple roses growing at different times, so they like the pruning. They thrive on it, you know.
Awesome. And then somebody asked, related to, as far as compost, potassium, is giving banana peel at the bottom feet of the roses any help to enrich roses with potassium?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
But don't just put it on top, because it would also bring mimics, those little insects, fly.
Yeah, it's best to put
in.
that. Yeah, dig that type of stuff in, because you want it to break down in the soil instead of being right on top where a lot of bugs can get to it, and that can make your it can make your rose area filled with a bunch of bugs, and you just don't want that. So it's best, if you're gonna use that in your soil, dig it in.
Thank you. And then two last questions. One was just about, again, back to mulching. Can you clarify with mulch in the winter, clarify mulch in winter, remove mulch in the spring, no need for mulch in the summer when blooming? Can you just clarify a little bit more about mulching? And then the next question was just, do you ever propagate roses? And if yes, what's the best method for doing that?
We haven't. We tried to do the propagation of the roses. I've been doing some research, but it hasn't been working out for me. So I wouldn't know how to answer that one. I am gonna try what I've seen in online with the internet, with the potato. You could try those steps. I mean, what you're gonna do is you're gonna take out as much of this mulch as possible. Once you take it out, you're gonna see that you have a root ball, right? This is where you're gonna add your nutrients. This is where you're gonna add fresh compost. You could add your coffee grinds, and you could add your banana peel. Once you take all this out, you're gonna put a nice thick layer of your compost
And soil.
soil. You're gonna add fresh soil, add fresh compost, and eliminate all this. Once it comes November, when you pull most of this back, you're gonna add all the mulch as much as possible. So you're gonna add all this mulch back into your roses.
So the reason for removing the mulch around the springtime, summertime is because you're gonna be watering them. The mulch kind of holds the moisture in there, and you don't want too much moisture around them because that's also what gives it the black fungus. So you don't want too much moisture around. You're already watering them the whole summer, so you don't need that extra thickness around it. You leave that in the winter because it kind of leaves it dormant. It holds the it takes care of the roots basically.
So since this is our rose area, we're gonna take a day and just take out all this mulch. We're gonna add this mulch in our compost bin. Take out some fresh compost and add the compost here. Since we have chickens in the garden, we also add some, we mix it up with some of the chicken poop. So there's a lot of ways where you could use fertilizer. So we have chickens, that's why we have so many beautiful roses here. Where we use their poop, we use the compost, we use eggshells. Okay, so yeah, you're gonna take all this out. This is where you, if you want, you could put your banana peels all around and then add the compost on top. The fresh roses, we planted them in late November. As you can tell, we didn't do no pruning. And we're still not gonna do no pruning unless we see something that's dead. That's the only time we're gonna prune. Any other questions?
Yes, there was two more. Can you please repeat what you mentioned using coffee grinds and what else for? You might have just answered that, but they asked specifically about coffee grinds and.
So coffee grinds, banana peels, eggshells, and since she has a chicken coop here, she uses the chicken poop and mixes everything together. There's a lot of nutrients in all of that. You mix it all together, you put it on the bottom, and then you add the soil and compost on top.
Okay, and then there was one more about the solution, I think for the disease. Can you distribute the solution with the spray can?
Yes. Yes, you can. You kind of want to get the top of the leaves. So it's better to use a spray can, actually. It's better to use a spray can because you want to just get over the top of all these leaves.
And if you're using the 1 gallon tank, you could put little holes here.
If you're actually going to use this instead of
a
watering can or anything, you can poke holes at the top and turn it into your own watering can. But yeah, spray is best because you want to get the leaves.
All right, and I think that was all the questions so far. Oh, we have another one. Will birds eat that mixture of compost, eggshells, etc.? Should I add hay to the top to keep them from eating?
Hay is gonna add. Hay is no good.
No, you want to add soil on top. Because if you add the soil on top, there's nothing, they can't get to it because it's covered up with the soil and the compost. So you want to add the soil and compost on top. That's why we suggest you bury it or you have it underground instead of laying it right on top next to your roses.
If you want to add hay, a light layer.
If you do want to add hay, add a very light layer.
And just keep in mind that hay will bring up grass.
Yeah, hay will bring up grass. So be careful with that. My suggestion is no hay, but
Want to use hay.
But if you do want to use it, just go light.
And someone mentioned that horse manure is good as well.
But don't make sure that it's mixed a couple of times because it could burn the roses too if it's too strong. So you want to make sure it's mixed with compost.
Yeah, so if you use horse manure or something like that, it is good for your plants, but there's too much nutrients in there, so you kind of want to dilute it a little bit with regular soil or compost.
Okay, so that is all the questions that I have that I've seen on the chat so far. So if you wanted to introduce another topic, please go ahead, because seems that that's all the questions that people have so far.
So we talked about the deadheading. We talked about
Pruning deadheading.
If y'all want to see some pruning, I could feel free to show some
Oh,
pruning.
we could show the new growth.
You want to talk about the new growth?
Okay, so something I kind of didn't mention into depth was the new growth. These roses are about, what'd you say, a year old?
Not even. I planted them in November.
So they were planted in November. So they're small like that. You don't really need any pruning when they're this small. You got to kind of wait till they get about 4 feet. So about the one that's next to it. Because you want to make sure that that the stems and the branches are strong enough to withhold it. You got to give them time to get that strength first. So when you first get roses, don't prune at first until they grow about 4 feet into your soil.
And you want to make sure the ground is always out.
Yeah, make sure the ground's always weeded out.
You don't want the
always cleared.
You don't want the weeds to overpower the roses because they'll take out all the nutrients from the soil. If you want to have mulch around your garden bed, just create a dome. That way you won't put it on the roses. So if you want to create a mulch area around your garden beds, it's fine. Just create a dome. That way none of the mulch will go on to the roses. Because the mulch is good for killing the weeds. So you want to make sure you have an area where it's not too much weeds. So you want to not work too much in the garden. So you're going to create a layer of mulch, but you're going to separate domes around each of the rose bushes. So you won't add the wood chips or the mulch around it.
And when watering, always water at the bottom. You don't want to water the leaves because there's a chance you could singe them as well. So always water from the bottom. And leave your roses in a place that has a lot of sunlight. I'd say about 6 to 8 hours of sunlight is what they need.
So a lot of people like roses, right? A lot of people like roses. So you want to make sure roses are good, but they also need air in between. So this is what Michelle was talking about when you want to
cut from the inside.
Cut from the inside. So you just
they need air and open space in the middle.
So this is where you do a lot of the pruning, and it eliminates some of these. That way it opens up a little bit.
You want to open it up from the center always. I got to go back here because the rain.
What else we can talk about?
Any more questions?
Yeah, there's a few more questions. Okay, one, how can you tell what kind of roses we have? And related, can you start a new rose bush from the clippings of another?
Some people actually tried it. They do produce. What I usually do is sometimes they have the roses have like little babies in the side. So I actually try to spare it out and do it from the roots. I don't do it from cuttings. Switch camera. So yeah, I don't do it from cuttings. I do it actually from the rose itself. I let's say I have that one in a pot and I wanted to repot it, so I take it and I divide it in with the roots. I never tried doing the cuttings. I don't know how to do that.
Okay, and then can you cut the roses on the young plants?
Yes. Well, not the ones that, remember, you're waiting for the ones that you first got. You have to wait 3 seasons before you do any kind of cuttings.
Yeah, wait 3 for the young plants. You want to wait 3 seasons before you cut anything. If you are to cut anything, just cut any dead leaves or dead roses that you see coming out of it. But try not to actually prune it right now until it grows 4 feet. You want it to be stable enough and strong enough for the pruning.
When you prune the new roses, make sure you instead of cutting the roses like Michelle said, you're gonna dehead it and just use that and leave the rose buds there.
Yeah, so you're not actually using any shears or tools. You mostly use your hands for this, and you just dehead, pull out the dead bulb, the dead plant.
Okay, and then you had another question. This last winter, I let my rose make rose hips. I cut them out. Should I have left them on the plant?
You should have just deheaded them, just pulled out all the roses and used them in your potpourri. You could have done different types of things. You could have made soaps. You could take some nice baths with them. If you cut let's say you have an established rose bush, you're gonna cut it 1/3 quarter. So you don't want them to overgrow like trees. You definitely don't want that. So you're gonna always keep them at a height where you could see them. You don't want them too big because then you lose. Instead of producing flowers, it's gonna just produce green. So maybe that's why that person that asked the question about why I'm not getting too many flowers. Maybe she thinks because it's a big bush, it's better for her. It actually, no, it's not. It's actually better if you have a little bush and you keep opening it up so it could get all the air, and then the energy will go into shooting roses.
That's why you prune as much as you can in the early springtime. You try to prune as much as you can. That way, a lot can grow and a lot of new growth, not just a lot of green, but a lot of actual roses come out when you do prune them at an early stage like that, and when you prune them enough. During the fall, you want to dehead them instead of pruning them because it just helps them go dormant and it keeps the nutrients in the plant.
Anything else?
Awesome. Okay, we just got one. When you say to trim/prune climbing roses late, do you mean late in the spring or at the end of the season once summer is over?
In the later the season, once summer is over, you want to make sure you enjoy all your flowers before they go into dorm. Before you add your mulch, you start pruning it down as much as you want for it could grow again next season.
Thank you, Lily. People are just saying thanks so much for these great tips. They're very thankful. I don't see any other questions, and I think you've answered all of the ones that folks wrote on the chat. Anything else that you'd like to share, Lily? Oh, somebody just asked, what about pricing trimming climbing roses in spring?
Repeat that question.
It says, what about pricing trimming climbing roses in spring? Oh, pruning. They meant pruning. What about pruning, trimming, climbing roses in spring?
The only time you're gonna do those is using the triple D's. Is if it's disease, is if it's
Disease, dead, or damaged. Triple D's, disease, dead, or damaged. Or crossing.
that's the only
That's
time
the only time you really want to prune
the
in the climbing roses in the spring.
Okay,